There is no wall at the end of the universe. Travel as far as you like, in any direction, for as long as you like, and you will never come to a boundary where space simply stops. That should be a comfort. It is not, because the universe does not need a wall to have an edge. It has several of them, real ones, that physics can locate to within a fraction of a percent, and not one of them is the thing you imagined. There is an edge you can see but never reach. There is an edge of ancient fire that surrounds you on every side. There is an edge that light itself cannot cross, carrying most of the sky permanently out of our grasp. And there is an edge that is not in space at all, but in time. We are going to walk out to every one of them tonight, and I want to be honest with you before we take the first step. The closer we get to the edge of the universe, the more terrifying it becomes. Get comfortable and settle in. Hit subscribe if this is your first time here, because by the end of this, the darkness between the stars will mean something it never meant to you before. Now, let's gently fall into this. Part 1. The wall that isn't there. Somewhere in your memory, there is a picture you never chose to make. It shows the universe as a room. Space fills most of it, stars and galaxies scattered through the middle like dust in a shaft of light, and then, far out past the last of them, there is a boundary, a wall, an outer surface where the universe stops and something else begins, or where nothing begins at all. Almost everyone carries some version of this picture because it is the most natural thing in the world to imagine. A thing that is big must still be a thing, and a thing has an outside. So the mind draws an edge and puts it at the end of everything, and quietly assumes that if we could only travel far enough, for long enough, we would eventually arrive at it and press our hands against it. Tonight we are going to travel toward that edge. And the first thing you should know, before we take a single step, is that we are not going to find the wall. There is no wall. There is no outer surface, no far side, no place where the universe simply stops. That picture in your memory, the one you never chose, is wrong. But here is what the textbooks tend to leave out, the part that makes this worth staying awake for a little longer. The universe does not have one edge. It has several. They are real, they are measurable, and physics can tell you exactly where each one lies, to within a fraction of a percent. The strangeness is not that the edges do not exist. The strangeness is how many of them there are, stacked one behind another like doors in a hallway, and the fact that every time we open one and look through, the thing waiting on the other side is worse than the thing before it. Let us start by taking the wall apart, because the relief of losing it will not last, and you should enjoy it while it does. When astronomers say there is no edge to the universe, they are not being coy or mystical. They are describing something they have tested. On the largest scales, the universe looks the same in every direction and from every location. Point your telescope at one patch of sky and count the galaxies. Then point it at the opposite patch and count again, and you get the same answer. The average density of matter, the distribution of galaxies, the temperature of the leftover light from the beginning, all of it is uniform everywhere we look to a remarkable degree. Cosmologists call this the cosmological principle, and it has a consequence that undoes the wall completely. If every place looks the same, then no place is special, and an edge would be a very special place indeed. An edge is where things stop being uniform, where you would find galaxies on one side and emptiness on the other. We do not see that anywhere. We see the same crowded, even sky in every direction, all the way out to the limit of our sight. There is a subtlety here that is easy to miss and worth slowing down for, because it will matter at every step tonight. When cosmologists say the universe has no edge, they are making a claim about the whole universe, the entire thing, all of space that exists. But the whole universe and the part of it we can see are not the same, and the difference between them is the seed of nearly everything that follows. We can see only a limited region, a sphere around us, and that sphere does have a boundary. The whole may have none. So, there is no single answer to the question of the edge. There is the edge of the scene, which is real and near and closing, and there is the edge of the whole, which may not exist at all. Keeping those two apart is the difference between understanding this and being permanently confused by it. It helps to notice how thoroughly the childhood wall is built into our language. We say, "The universe is expanding," and immediately the mind asks, "Expanding into what?" as if there had to be an outside for it to grow into. An empty room the universe is filling up. But that question smuggles the wall back in through the side door. The expansion is not the universe swelling outward into some surrounding void. It is the distances inside the universe, all growing at once, everywhere, with no outside required and no edge advancing into anything. The universe is not getting bigger the way a balloon gets bigger in a room. It is getting bigger the way a number gets bigger, from within, at every point. Once you feel how strange that is, you are ready to leave the wall behind for good and to meet the edges that are actually there. You can feel how this dissolves the childhood picture if you think about the surface of the earth. Imagine walking in a straight line across the world, never turning. You will never come to the edge of the surface, never reach a cliff where the ground ends and you fall off. The surface has no edge, but it is not infinite either. It is finite, and it curves back on itself, and if you walk long enough, you return to where you began. The two-dimensional surface has no boundary, even though it has a limited size. The universe may be doing something similar in 3 dimensions, curving in a way our eyes cannot picture, so that there is no wall to walk into no matter how far or how long you travel. Or it may simply go on without end. Either way, the wall you imagined is gone. There is no place out there where the universe stops. That should feel like good news, and for a moment it is. The frightening thing about a wall was always what might be waiting at it, or behind it. Take the wall away, and the fear should go with it. But this is the trap, and I want to be honest with you about it now, at the very start, so that you can watch it happen. Removing the wall does not remove the edges. It only removes the easy one, the one your intuition invented. What replaces it is a set of real edges, defined not by where matter runs out, but by the finite speed of light, the age of the universe, and the strange fact that space itself is growing. These edges are not made of anything. You could never touch them. But they are far more absolute than any wall could ever be. And as we move outward tonight, we are going to meet them one at a time. Each one will take away a little more of the comfort you started with. That is the shape of this journey. It gets worse the closer we get. Remember that, because every time you feel the ground steady beneath you again, there is another edge behind it. So hold on to the relief for now. There is no wall at the end of everything. Enjoy that. But keep one eye on the hallway of doors, because we are about to open the first one, and behind it is an edge that is not a wall at all, and is somehow more unsettling for it. Part 2. The edge you can see. The first real edge does not lie at the end of matter. It lies at the end of light's patience. To understand it, you have to sit for a moment with something you already half know, but rarely let yourself feel, which is that light takes time to travel. It is fast, unimaginably fast by the standards of anything you have ever handled, but it is not instant. When you look at the sun, you are seeing it as it was about 8 minutes ago, because that is how long its light took to cross the space between us. When you look at the nearest star beyond the sun, you are seeing light that left it more than 4 years ago. Look at the next galaxy, the great spiral of Andromeda, and the light entering your eye began its journey about 2.5 million years ago, before your species had taken its modern shape. Everything you see in the sky is old. The farther away it is, the older the light. Now push that idea to its limit. The universe has been expanding and cooling for about 13.8 billion years. That is how long there has been a universe for light to travel through. So the farthest thing you could possibly see is a thing whose light has been traveling for the entire history of the universe, 13.8 billion years, and no longer, because there simply has not been any more time than that. Light from anything more distant has not arrived yet. It is still on its way, still crossing the gap, and it will keep crossing for ages before it reaches us, if it ever does. This gives us our first true edge. It is not a wall. It is a horizon, a boundary drawn by time, marking the distance beyond which no signal has yet had the chance to reach us. Astronomers call it the particle horizon, and it defines what we call the observable universe. It is the edge of the seeable, not the edge of the real. Here is where it starts to bend the mind. You might think that if light has been traveling for 13.8 billion years, the edge of the observable universe must be 13.8 billion light-years away. It is a reasonable guess. It is also wrong, and the reason it is wrong is the quiet engine of this entire video. Space has been expanding the whole time that light was in flight. The light set out from a place that was much closer to us when it left, but while it travelled, the space between here and there stretched, carrying the source farther and farther away, even as its ancient light kept coming toward us. So the place that emitted the oldest light we can see is now not 13.8 billion light-years away, but roughly 46 billion light-years away. The observable universe is a sphere about 93 billion light-years across, more than 3 times wider than the simple guess, and it is that wide precisely because space refused to hold still. Sit with that gap between 13.8 and 46. That difference is the first hint that distance in this universe is not the plain, honest thing you grew up believing it was. Physicists have a careful way of talking about these two distances, and the care is not fussiness. It is survival, because sloppiness here breeds paradoxes. The distance the light actually travelled, 13.8 billion light-years, is one honest number. The distance to where that source sits now, 46 billion light-years, is a different honest number, because the source has been carried away while the light was crossing. Both are true. They describe the same object at different moments in the history of an expanding universe. Almost every apparent contradiction people run into when they think about the edge comes from mixing these two up, from using the travel time as if it were the present distance, or the present distance as if it were the travel time. When you hold them apart, the strangeness does not go away, but it stops being a contradiction and becomes simply the truth about a universe where space itself refuses to stay the same size. Sit for a moment with what it means that you are at the center of your own observable universe. It is not arrogance, and it is not illusion. It is geometry. Light has been traveling toward you for the age of the universe from every direction, so the sphere it defines is naturally centered on the point where it arrives, which is you. Move to a galaxy far from here, and the same thing would be true there, a sphere centered on that spot, reaching to places your sphere never touches. Every observer everywhere sits at the center of a personal cosmos, each one equally valid, none of them the true center, because there is no true center. The universe grants everyone the same quiet illusion of being at the middle of everything, and the illusion is not a lie. It is just what the geometry looks like from inside. There is something even stranger about this edge, something that quietly removes another assumption. The horizon is not in a fixed place that everyone in the universe would agree on. It is centered on you. The observable universe is a sphere drawn around the observer, its radius set by how long light has been traveling to that particular spot. A civilization in a galaxy far from here has its own observable universe, its own sphere, centered on itself, reaching to regions we will never see and blind to regions we see easily. There is no single map of the observable universe pinned to the wall of reality. There are as many maps as there are observers, each one convinced it sits at the center, and each one correct, because in the only sense that matters, each one does sit at the center of its own sphere of sight. You are at the center of yours right now. So is everyone, everywhere. And because the horizon is drawn by the travel time of light rather than by any object, it behaves like nothing solid ever could. Suppose you set out toward it, traveling in one direction for 1 billion years. You might expect to close the distance, to get 1 billion light years nearer to the edge. You would not. As you traveled, more time would pass, and more distant light would have the chance to reach your new location, and the horizon would redraw itself 1 billion light years farther out. It would stay exactly as far away as it had always been, retreating from you as fast as you chased it, like the horizon at sea that slips backward as you sail toward it, always the same distance off, no matter how hard you row. You cannot reach this edge, not because it is too far, but because it is not a place. It is a relationship between you and the age of the light, and it moves whenever you do. That is the first door. There is no wall, only a horizon, personal and unreachable, marking the limit of what has had time to be seen. It sounds almost gentle, described this way, but we have only established what this edge is. We have not yet asked what it feels like to look at it, to really look and understand what the looking means. Because when you stare at the edge of the observable universe, you are not just looking at the most distant place. You are looking at the most distant time. And that turns the whole sky into something closer to a graveyard than a map. Part 3. Looking out is looking back. Let us go back to that simple fact from a moment ago and refuse to let it stay simple. Light takes time to travel, so everything you see is old. We used it to explain the size of the observable universe. Now, we are going to use it to change what the night sky is. Because if the farther away a thing is, the older its light, then distance and time are not two separate measurements out there among the galaxies. They are the same measurement. To look far is to look back. There is no way to see a distant object as it is now. You can only ever see it as it was, and the more distant it is, the further into the past you are seeing. The sky is not a snapshot of the universe as it stands. It is a stack of moments, each one older than the one behind it, layered outward from you toward the edge. This means that when you tip your head back on a clear night, you are not looking at the universe. You are looking at its history, spread across the dome of the sky like the rings of a tree read from the outside in. The moon you see is a little over a second old. The planets are minutes to hours old. The stars scattered across the constellations are years to thousands of years old, their light having left before some of the cities you know were built. The faint band of the Milky Way is a smear of light tens of thousands of years in age. And the dim, fuzzy patches at the limit of vision, the other galaxies, are millions of years old, images of places as they were before there were human eyes to receive them. You have never once seen the sky as it is. No one ever has. You see only the sky as it was, all of its moments arriving at once, sorted by distance. Follow this outward toward the edge, and it becomes something more than a curiosity. As you look farther, you see younger and younger versions of the universe. Galaxies at moderate distances appear as they were when they were still forming, still ragged and bright with new stars. Beyond them, the light comes from an era when galaxies were barely assembled, when the cosmos was a churn of gas slowly gathering itself into the first structures. Push farther still, and you approach a time before any stars had formed at all, when the universe was younger, hotter, denser, and emptier of everything you would recognize. The edge of the observable universe is not just the most distant place. It is the earliest time. To travel toward the edge with your telescope is to travel backward toward the beginning. The horizon in space is a horizon in time, and it points at the birth of everything. You can make this concrete with the brightest, most distant beacons we know. There are objects called quasars, the blazing cores of young galaxies powered by enormous black holes, so luminous that we can see them across most of the observable universe. When we study one, we are studying an object, as it was when the universe was a small fraction of its present age, a portrait of the cosmos in its youth. There is no way to see any of these places as they are now. The concept of now, applied across such distances, barely means anything at all, because there is no universal clock ticking the same instant everywhere that we could point to and call the present of a galaxy 10 billion light-years away. There is only the light, and the light is always old, and the older it is, the younger the universe it shows. This is why the sky is less like a photograph and more like a fossil bed, with the layers sorted by depth. Near the surface, the recent past, are the close, familiar stars. Below them, older, are the more distant stars and the near galaxies. Further down, still are galaxies caught in the act of forming. And below those, the first faint structures of a universe, barely old enough to have any. Each layer is a different age, and you read them all at once by looking in different directions and at different distances. No archaeologist ever had a dig site like this, where every era of the entire history of everything lies exposed at the same time, waiting only for a telescope patient enough to gather the faint old light. And at the very bottom of the dig, below the oldest galaxies, there is a floor we cannot dig past, and that floor is the next edge. There is a phrase for what this does to the sky, and it is not a comfortable one. The night sky is a museum of the dead. A great many of the stars you can see with your unaided eyes are almost certainly still there, because they are close and stellar lifetimes are long. But among the more distant objects, the ones whose light has travelled for millions or billions of years, a large number no longer exist in the form you are seeing. The galaxy whose light you are receiving tonight has moved on through millions of years of its own history while that light was in transit. Stars in it have died. New ones have been born. Some of those far galaxies have collided and merged and become something else entirely. You are receiving portraits of the departed, mailed long ago, arriving only now, long after the sitters have changed beyond recognition or vanished. The light is real. The thing it shows may be gone. And you have no way to know, because the only news you will ever get from that place is this ancient light, and it will always be this old. Notice what has happened here, because it is the pattern of the whole night. We began with a comforting fact that light takes time, and we followed it just one step further than we usually allow, and it turned the sky into a graveyard of images. This is what each edge does. It takes something you already accept and extends it until it removes a reassurance you did not know you were holding. Here, the reassurance we lose is the idea that the sky shows us the universe. It does not. It shows us the past and only the past, layered by distance, and the farther toward the edge we look, the further into a vanished cosmos we are staring. We are not observers of the present universe. We are readers of its obituaries, and the obituaries are all we will ever have. There is an even stranger consequence buried in this, one that physics takes completely seriously. Across enormous distances, there is no agreed-upon now at all. The idea of the present moment, shared everywhere at once, is something our everyday experience invents, and the universe does not honour. Two events far apart in space cannot be said, in any absolute way, to happen at the same time, because there is no universal instant ticking through all of space together. So when you ask what a galaxy 10 billion light-years away is doing right now, the question quietly falls apart in your hands. There is no now out there for it to be doing anything in. There is only the old light on its way to you, and the older light on its way to someone else, and no master clock anywhere that could say which distant moment counts as the present. The word now, which feels like the most solid thing in the world, turns out to be a local comfort with no meaning at the scale of the whole, and there is a hard limit to how far back this reading can go. You can look outward, and therefore backward, toward younger and younger epochs, but not forever. At some point, quite close to the beginning, the universe stops being transparent. The light cannot reach you from any earlier time, no matter how good your telescope, because before that moment, the universe itself was not clear. It was a fog. And that fog forms the next edge, the second real boundary in our hallway of doors, and it is not a horizon you sail toward. It is a wall of light, standing across the entire sky, and behind it, the universe keeps a secret that no ordinary telescope will ever be allowed to see. Part 4. The Wall of Fire. We have found 2 edges so far, and neither was the wall you imagined. The first was the horizon of what has had time to be seen. The second was the discovery that looking outward is looking backward, that the edge in space is an edge in time. Now, those 2 ideas are going to combine into something you can genuinely call a wall, though it is a wall made of light rather than brick, and it is stranger and more total than any barrier your intuition could have built. To find it, we keep doing what we did in the last part. We look outward, which means backward, toward earlier and earlier times, and we ask how far back the light can carry us. The answer is that it carries us to a moment about 380,000 years after the beginning, and then it stops. Not because there is nothing earlier, because earlier the universe could not let light through at all. To understand why, you have to picture the early universe, and the picture is nothing like the cold, clear, star-dotted space we live in now. In its first few 100,000 years, the cosmos was so hot and so dense that atoms could not hold together. Electrons, the light particles that normally orbit atomic nuclei, were torn loose and roamed free in a searing plasma, a fog of charged particles filling all of space. And light cannot travel far through such a fog. A photon, a particle of light, would fly a tiny distance and then collide with a free electron, scatter off in a random direction, fly again, collide again, over and over, forever bouncing, never getting anywhere. The early universe was opaque, glowing like the inside of a furnace, its light trapped and scattering endlessly, unable to travel in a straight line for more than an instant. If you had been there, you could not have seen across the room. There were no rooms. There was only the fog, everywhere, blindingly bright and utterly impenetrable. Then the universe expanded and cooled, as it has been doing ever since, and at about 380,000 years of age, it crossed a threshold. It grew cool enough, finally, for the electrons to slow down and be captured by the nuclei, joining with them to form the first complete neutral atoms, mostly hydrogen. This event has a quiet name, recombination, and it changed everything about how the universe looked, because neutral atoms do not scatter light the way free electrons do. All at once, across all of space, the fog cleared. The endlessly bouncing photons were suddenly free to fly in straight lines, unobstructed, and most of them have been flying, untouched, ever since. The universe became transparent in a single cosmic moment, and the light that was set free in that moment is still crossing space today, 13.8 billion years later, still arriving, still carrying the imprint of the instant the fog lifted. That light is the wall. We call it the cosmic microwave background, and it is the oldest light there is, the afterglow of the hot young universe, released at the surface where the fog turned to clarity. It comes at us from every direction at once, from all over the sky, because the fog cleared everywhere at the same time. When you look out toward it, you are looking back to that final instant of opacity, the last moment before the universe let light go, and you cannot see past it. No telescope built to gather light can ever see earlier than this, because earlier there was only the fog, and no straight-line light escaped it. It is a genuine wall, a surface across the whole sky, and it has a name that captures exactly what it is, the surface of last scattering. It is the place where the light we see was scattered for the last time before flying free to us. It is worth pausing on what that leftover light has been able to tell us, because it is not a blank wall, it is a written one. When instruments mapped the temperature of the ancient light across the whole sky, they found it almost perfectly smooth, the same warmth in every direction to astonishing precision. But not exactly the same. There are faint ripples in it, differences of a few parts in 100,000, patches very slightly warmer and slightly cooler than the average. Those ripples are the most important imperfections in the history of the universe, because they are the seeds. The slightly denser regions, marked by those tiny temperature differences, are where gravity would later gather matter into the first stars, the first galaxies, the whole cosmic web we toured. Every galaxy that exists, including our own, grew from one of those faint blemishes on the wall of ancient light. You are looking at the blueprint of everything, printed on the last surface light ever left freely. The story of its discovery is almost too fitting to be true. The two researchers who found the ancient light in 1965 were not looking for it. They were trying to eliminate a persistent hiss in their radio antenna, a faint static that came from every direction and would not go away. They checked every source of interference they could think of. They even cleaned out a pair of pigeons that had nested in the antenna, suspecting the mess the birds left behind might be the cause. The hiss remained. It remained because it was not interference at all. It was the cooled glow of the newborn universe, the wall of last scattering, knocking faintly and evenly on their instrument from every part of the sky at once. They had been trying to remove the oldest light in existence, as if it were noise. It was, instead, the most important signal ever detected, and it is still falling on you now, 400 and some particles of it in every cubic centimetre of the room. Let me give you the details that make this wall real rather than poetic, because they are measured, not imagined. The light left that surface when the universe was about 380,000 years old. It was blindingly bright when it was released, the glow of a furnace at thousands of degrees. But it has been travelling for 13.8 billion years through expanding space, and that expansion has stretched its waves out enormously, cooling the light by a factor of more than 1,000. Its wavelength has been stretched about 1,100-fold. What began as a fierce glow has been drawn out into faint microwaves, and its temperature today is just under 3 degrees above absolute zero, a whisper of warmth, measured with exquisite precision at about 2.7 Kelvin. It was first detected in 1965 by two researchers who found an unremovable hiss in their radio antenna that they could not explain, a faint static coming from every direction of the sky, which turned out to be the cooled light of the newborn universe knocking on the door. And it is not somewhere far away. Right now, in the room around you, in the space between you and this screen, there are roughly 411 particles of that ancient light in every cubic centimetre, passing through you, through the walls, through everything, the leftover glow of the fog that cleared 13.8 billion years ago. So here is where the second door leaves you standing. You are inside a sphere of ancient fire. In every direction you look, out at the limit of what light can show, there is a wall, the surface of last scattering, the glowing skin of the young universe frozen at the moment it turned clear. You cannot see through it. You are surrounded by it, on all sides, always, and it has been closing you in your whole life without your ever feeling it. This is the point where the journey stops being merely disorienting and starts to press on something older in the mind, a kind of claustrophobia at the scale of everything. The edge is not a distant wall you might one day reach. It is a wall around you, right now, on every side. And it gets worse from here, because the natural next question is the one that should never have a frightening answer, and yet does. What is behind the wall? Part 5. What the wall is hiding. The wall of light stands across the whole sky, and we said you cannot see past it. That is true, but it hides a loophole, and the loophole is more unsettling than the wall, because the surface of last scattering is not the edge of the universe. It is only the edge of what light can show you. The universe did not begin at 380,000 years of age. There were 380,000 years before it, hot and dense and eventful, and they are still there, still part of the real history of everything, sitting behind the wall where no ordinary telescope can ever look. The wall is not the boundary of reality. It is the boundary of one particular messenger, and once you understand that, you start to wonder what the other messengers might be carrying. Light is only one way the universe sends news about itself. It happens to be the messenger we evolved to read, the one our eyes and our telescopes are built for, so we treat it as the whole of what can be known. But light has a weakness we have already met. It cannot cross a fog of charged particles. That is exactly why the wall exists. So if we want to see behind the wall, we need a messenger that does not care about the fog, something that flew straight through the hot young universe when light could not. And remarkably, there are at least two such messengers, both real, both predicted by the same physics that gives us everything else, and both currently at or beyond the ragged edge of what we can detect. The first is a particle you have almost certainly never thought about, though trillions of them are passing through your body every second, right now, without touching a single atom of you. It is called the neutrino, and its defining trait is that it barely interacts with anything at all. A neutrino can pass through a light year of solid lead with only a modest chance of being stopped. This near ghostliness makes neutrinos maddeningly hard to catch, but it also gives them a power light does not have. In the first second of the universe, long before the fog cleared, the cosmos was already transparent to neutrinos. They stopped interacting and flew free when the universe was about 1 second old, and they have been streaming through space ever since, a cosmic neutrino background older than the wall of light by hundreds of thousands of years. If we could build detectors sensitive enough to read them, we would be looking at the universe as it was in its first second, a snapshot from behind the wall, from an era light will never show us. We have not yet managed it. The neutrinos are too faint, too slippery, and by now they have cooled to less than 2 degrees above absolute zero. But they are there, passing through you as you listen, carrying a picture of the newborn universe that we simply cannot yet develop. The near-deafness is worth feeling honestly, because it reframes how much we actually know. Consider how ghostly the neutrino really is. As you sit here, something like 100 trillion neutrinos from the sun alone pass through your body every second, and in your entire life, only a tiny handful will ever so much as touch one of your atoms. They pour through the earth as though it were not there, through you, through everything, almost never interacting. That is exactly what makes them able to carry news from behind the wall, and exactly what makes them so nearly impossible to read. We have detectors that catch a few neutrinos from the sun and from exploding stars, enormous tanks buried far underground, and even those heroic instruments catch only the loudest, freshest neutrinos. The faint, cold ones left over from the first second of the universe are, for now, entirely beyond us, streaming through every detector we have, without leaving a mark. The lesson of this edge is a humbling one, and it sharpens everything that comes after. We are built to read one messenger, light, and light is stopped by the wall. Behind that wall lies the first and hottest history of the universe, spoken in messengers we can barely hear, the ghostly neutrino and the trembling of space itself. We are not standing at the edge of what exists. We are standing at the edge of what we can perceive, straining to catch faint whispers from a region far larger and older than anything our eyes were made for. It should make us hold our knowledge a little more loosely, and it should make the darkness behind the wall feel not empty but crowded with things we are almost, but not quite, deaf to. The second messenger is stranger still. It is not a particle, but a tremor in the shape of space itself, a gravitational wave. When mass moves violently, it sends ripples through the fabric of space-time, and those ripples travel outward at the speed of light, distorting distances as they pass. The most violent event we know of is the beginning itself, and the earliest instance of the universe should have set space-time ringing, producing a background of primordial gravitational waves from the first fraction of a second. Gravitational waves, like neutrinos, do not care about the fog. They passed straight through the plasma that blocked light. So they carry information from far behind the wall, from moments unimaginably close to the beginning, closer than any light or neutrino could reach. We have detected gravitational waves from colliding black holes, a triumph of the last decade, but the primordial background from the birth of the universe is fainter by an enormous margin, and it has not yet been found. When it is, it will be a message from the first sliver of time, delivered by the trembling of space, from a place the wall of light keeps permanently dark. So here is the shape of what the fifth edge teaches. The wall of fire that surrounds you, the one that felt so total a moment ago, is not total at all. It is a wall for one messenger only, and behind it lie hundreds of thousands of years of cosmic history, still real, still there, faintly whispering to us through particles and tremors we can barely hear. And this should not comfort you. It should do the opposite, because it means the wall we can see is not the true edge. It is a limit of our instruments, a boundary of our senses, rather than a boundary of the world. The universe is larger and older than the wall, and most of what lies behind the wall is nearly invisible to us, not because it is not sending news, but because we are almost deaf to the messengers who can cross the barrier. We are shut inside a sphere of ancient light, straining to hear the faint sounds of everything the light cannot reach, mostly failing, and only beginning to learn how much we have been missing. The trembling of space is worth dwelling on for a moment, because we crossed a genuine threshold with it in the last decade, and it hints at how the wall might eventually be pierced. For 100 years, gravitational waves were only a prediction, ripples in the shape of space too faint for anyone to imagine catching. Then, using instruments that can measure a change in length, smaller than a fraction of the width of a single atomic nucleus, we caught them, the waves from distant black holes colliding, the actual stretching and squeezing of space itself rolling through the Earth. That we can now feel space tremble at all is one of the quiet miracles of our particular moment. The primordial waves from the birth of the universe are far fainter still, beyond our current reach, but the fact that the door has opened even a crack tells us the wall of light is not the final word. There are messengers crossing it, and we have just begun, barely, to learn how to listen. That is the pattern, again, sharpened. Each edge takes away a reassurance. This one takes away the idea that what we can see is what there is. The wall marks the end of the visible, not the end of the real, and the real extends behind it into darkness we are only starting to probe. Hold on to that unsettling thought, because we are about to leave the walls behind for a moment and do something that sounds gentle and turns out to be the loneliest passage of the whole night. We are going to stop asking where the edges are and instead try to feel, honestly and fully, how much universe lies between us and them. Part 6. The Size of the Silence. We have been talking about edges as boundaries, as walls and horizons, lines drawn at the limit of things. But between us and those limits there is an interior, an enormous volume of universe, and we have not yet let ourselves feel how much of it there is. Numbers alone do not do it. When I tell you the observable universe is 93 billion light-years across, the figure slides off the mind like water off glass, too large to grip. So let us not use numbers for a moment. Let us travel instead, slowly, outward, and try to feel the size of the silence we live inside. I want you to come with me on this, gently, the way you might drift on the edge of sleep, rising up and out, away from the ground. Begin here, in this room, with the walls around you, and the weight of your body in the chair or the bed. Now lift, upward, through the ceiling, through the roof, into the night. The house shrinks below you to a small lit shape, then to a point, then it is lost among the pattern of streets and fields. Keep rising. The land curves. The horizon bends into the round shoulder of a planet, blue and white and turning. And then the whole earth is a marble hanging in black, small enough to cover with a thumb, and everyone you have ever known is on it. Every life, every story, all of it under that thumb. Do not stop. The moon slides past. The sun falls behind you, dwindling from a source of warmth to a bright star among stars, and the planets, those enormous worlds, are reduced to faint points strung along their slow orbits, and then they too are gone, and the whole solar system is a tiny bright mote lost in the dark. Keep rising, and now the scale changes in a way that is hard to hold. The nearest other star is so far that the light we saw leave it took years to arrive, and between here and there is nothing, an emptiness so complete that the solar system, for all its planets and comets, is a single grain adrift, in a stretch of dark you could never walk. And that one gap to the nearest star is nothing against what comes next. Pull back until the individual stars blur into a glowing wheel, hundreds of billions of suns turning together, a spiral of light with our own sun somewhere in the outer arms, one point among the hundreds of billions, not near the center, not special, just one. That is the Milky Way, our galaxy, and until you have felt yourself shrink to a mote within it, you have not really understood where you live. Now comes the part that undoes people. Keep rising until the entire Milky Way, that wheel of hundreds of billions of stars, becomes a single smudge of light. Around it, others appear. A companion galaxy, then a few more, a small gathering of them held loosely together. Pull back further, and this gathering is itself a speck among thousands of other galaxies, drawn into enormous strands and sheets, and the strands connect into a web, a lacework of galaxies stretched across the darkness, with immense empty hollows between the threads. This is the largest pattern there is, the cosmic web, and every knot of light in it is not a star but a galaxy, and every galaxy is hundreds of billions of stars. Keep going. The web extends in every direction, thread after thread, hollow after hollow, and the Milky Way, our entire galaxy, the wheel that held our unreachable neighbor stars, is now one dim point among the strands, indistinguishable, unremarkable, gone into the pattern. There are around 2 trillion galaxies within the reach of our telescopes. 2 trillion. Our own is one of them, and from far enough back you could not pick it out, could not find the thread it lies on, could not say which faint point held everyone who has ever lived. Let me hold you at one particular height on the way up, because it is the one that breaks most people, and it deserves its own moment. It is the gap between galaxies. We tend to picture the universe as full of stars, a place crowded with light, and near a galaxy that is true. But between the galaxies there is almost nothing at all, spans of near-perfect emptiness so wide that light itself, the fastest thing there is, takes millions of years to cross a single one of them. The nearest large galaxy to our own is separated from us by a gulf so enormous that our entire galaxy, the wheel of hundreds of billions of stars, is a small thing lost in the middle of it. And that is one of the close gaps. The typical distance between galaxies out in the general universe is far larger still. The cosmic web looks, from far away, like a glowing lace of light. Up close, it is mostly the hollows, mostly the dark between the threads, and the threads themselves are thin and rare. This is the moment when the loneliness of the scale becomes undeniable, and it is a specific kind of loneliness, not the loneliness of being small, but the loneliness of being separated. It is not that the universe is empty, it is full, 2 trillion galaxies full. It is that the full things are held so far apart, in such immense isolation, that the fullness might as well be emptiness for anyone hoping to cross it. Each galaxy is an island, and the ocean between the islands is not merely wide, it is growing, and it is growing faster than any ship of light could ever sail. When you rise up high enough to see the whole cosmic web at once, you are not looking at a community of galaxies. You are looking at a scattering of the marooned, each one alone on its own island of stars, each one seeing the others only as old light across an uncrossable dark. That, and not the size, is the true weight of the scale. And the reason the ocean grows is the thing we turn to next. Let yourself rest at that height for a moment, because there is a feeling waiting there, and it is not the one you might expect. From this distance, the beauty of it is undeniable, the glowing web hanging in the dark. But underneath the beauty, something colder settles in. Almost all of what you can see from here, you will never touch, not most of it, not a meaningful fraction of it. The overwhelming majority of those 2 trillion galaxies are so far away that no ship, no signal, no message sent at the speed of light could ever cross the space to reach them. They are visible and forever out of reach at the same time, and we will come to exactly why in a moment. The size of the universe is not an open invitation. It is a measure of separation. Every galaxy you can see is a place you are cut off from, and the enormity that looked like wonder, when you look at it honestly, is mostly a map of how alone each island of light truly is. Before we come back down, let one number do its quiet work on you, contextualized, so it cannot slide away. If you could somehow travel at the speed of light, the fastest anything is permitted to go, it would still take you tens of thousands of years just to cross our own galaxy from one side to the other, and more than 2 million years to reach the single nearest large neighbor. And our galaxy and that neighbor are, on the scale of the whole, practically touching 2 houses on the same tiny street in a settlement of 2 trillion. To cross from our street to the far reaches of what we can see would take, at that same impossible speed, tens of billions of years, longer than the universe has so far existed. The size is not a backdrop to the loneliness. The size is the loneliness measured out in the one currency that matters, the time it would take to close the gap, a time longer than the ages of stars. Come back down now, slowly, the way we went up. Back through the web, back into the smudge that is our galaxy, back to the outer arm, back to the small bright mote of the solar system, back to the blue marble, back through the night, and the roof and the ceiling, into this room, into your body, into the ordinary quiet around you. You are the same size you were when we left, but the universe around you is the size you just felt, and you carry that now. We rose up to feel the scale, and the scale turned out to be a kind of loneliness, an ocean of light we can see across, but never cross. And the reason we can never cross it is the next edge, the one that finally explains why so much of the visible universe is already, permanently, lost to us. To understand it, we have to look at the one thing we have been circling all night without naming plainly. Space is not just big. Space is growing, and that changes everything. Part 7. The edge that moves faster than light. Everything strange we have met tonight comes back to a single fact, and it is time to say it plainly and sit with it, because it is the engine underneath all the edges. Space is expanding, not the objects in space moving apart through a fixed emptiness, but the emptiness itself growing, swelling at every point, so that the distance between any 2 distant things increases over time, even when neither of them moves. This is not a theory that hangs by a thread. It is one of the most thoroughly tested facts in all of science, first seen almost 100 years ago, when astronomers noticed that nearly every distant galaxy has its light stretched toward the red, shifted in a way that means it is receding from us, and the farther away it is, the faster it recedes. The universe is not still. It is coming apart, gently and everywhere, and it has been coming apart since the beginning. You have to be careful about the picture in your head, because the wrong picture makes the next edge impossible, and the right picture makes it inevitable. Do not imagine galaxies flying outward through space like debris from an explosion, racing away from some central point. That is the childhood wall all over again, dressed differently. Imagine instead that space is like the surface of a loaf of bread dough rising in the oven, with raisins set through it. As the dough expands, every raisin moves away from every other raisin, not because the raisins are traveling through the dough, but because the dough between them is growing. From the point of view of any one raisin, all the others recede, and the distant ones recede faster than the near ones, because there is more dough between you and a far raisin to do the growing. No raisin is at the center. Every raisin sees the same thing. That is our universe. The galaxies are the raisins, space is the dough, and the growing of the dough is the expansion. Now, the consequence that should stop you. If the recession is caused by the growth of space, and if farther galaxies recede faster because there is more space between us to grow, then there must be a distance at which the growth of space adds up to a recession speed equal to the speed of light itself. And beyond that distance, there must be galaxies receding faster than light. This sounds like a violation of the one rule everyone knows, the cosmic speed limit, the law that nothing can travel faster than light. But it is not a violation, and the reason is subtle and important. Nothing is traveling faster than light through space. The galaxies are barely moving through space at all. It is the space between us and them that is expanding, and there is no law, none, that limits how fast space can grow. Motion through space is capped at the speed of light. The growth of space itself has no such cap. So galaxies beyond a certain distance are carried away from us faster than any light could travel, not by moving, but by the swelling of the emptiness in between. It is worth being very precise about the reddening of the light, because it is the direct evidence, the thing we actually measure, and everything else is built on it. When light travels through expanding space, its waves are stretched along with the space they move through. A wave that left a distant galaxy as blue light arrives, after billions of years of stretching, shifted toward the red, its wavelength drawn out by the growth of the space it crossed. The farther the light has come, the more space there was to do the stretching, and the redder it arrives. This is not a small effect at the limits of the observable universe. The most distant light has been stretched not by a little but by enormous factors, its waves pulled out many times over. We do not infer the expansion from theory and then go looking for it. We see it directly, written into the colour of every distant thing, the fingerprint of space that would not hold still while the light was passing through. Notice how completely this dismantles the last version of the childhood picture. The instinct is to imagine that if galaxies are receding, they must be moving, flying apart through space from some centre, like fragments from a blast. But if that were the picture, then galaxies receding faster than light really would break the most fundamental law we have, and the whole scheme would collapse. The reason it does not collapse is that the galaxies are barely moving through space at all. They sit nearly still in their own patch of the universe, and the patches themselves drift apart as the space between them grows. The speed limit, the law that nothing outruns light, governs motion through space, objects crossing from one place to another. It says nothing at all about how fast space itself may grow, and space, it turns out, can grow as fast as it likes. That single loophole, quiet and almost invisible, is the crack through which the worst of the edges enters. That certain distance has a name. It is called the Hubble sphere, and it lies about 14 billion light-years away, marking the shell beyond which galaxies recede faster than light due to expansion alone. And here, the edges we have been collecting take on a new and colder character. Until now, every edge was passive. The wall of light just sat there. The horizon of sight simply marked how far the light had come. But this edge moves, and it moves in the most disorienting way possible, because it reveals that the universe is not a fixed stage on which things happen. The stage itself is growing, faster than light at sufficient distance, carrying whole galaxies out beyond the reach of anything we could ever send. The ground you trusted, the steady emptiness of space, is doing something the steady emptiness was never supposed to do. It is expanding out from under the very idea of a fixed distance, and it is doing it fast enough to outrun light. The rate of the growth has a name and a number, and both come with a warning worth hearing. The expansion rate tells you how fast the space between things is stretching, and from it you can work out where the Hubble sphere lies and how far each horizon sits. But here is a humbling detail that should keep anyone honest about all these figures. When we measure that expansion rate one way, using the ancient light on the wall of the sky, we get one value. When we measure it another way, using the brightness of closer objects, we get a slightly but stubbornly different value. The two methods disagree by more than their uncertainties should allow, and after years of careful work, the disagreement has not gone away. It may be a subtle error somewhere. It may be a crack in our understanding through which some new physics is showing. Either way, it is a reminder that the exact distances to these edges carry a genuine question mark, and that the universe is still holding back pieces of the answer, even about the numbers we quote most confidently. I want to be honest about how much this bends. We are taught that the speed of light is the ultimate limit, the thing nothing can exceed, and it is, for motion through space. But the expansion of space slips around that limit entirely, and once you see that, a door opens onto the worst of all the edges. Because if space can carry a galaxy away from us faster than light, then light leaving that galaxy right now, aimed straight at us, would be swimming upstream against a current moving faster than it can swim. It would never arrive. The galaxy is not hidden behind a wall. It is not merely too far to have been seen yet. It is being carried away faster than its own light can cross the gap, which means its light sent today will never, ever reach us. We are severed from it, completely and permanently, while it still hangs there in our older photographs, visible, bright, and utterly lost. That severing has a boundary of its own, the most important edge in this entire journey, and we are finally ready to open its door. Part 8. The edge nothing can cross. Here is the edge I have been walking you toward all night, the one that turns cosmic distance from a matter of patience into a matter of permanent loss. We have seen that space expands, and that far enough away it carries galaxies from us faster than light can cross the widening gap. Draw the boundary where that severing becomes final, where light leaving a galaxy today can never, under any circumstances, reach us no matter how long we wait, and you have drawn the cosmic event horizon. It lies about 16 billion light-years away in present terms, and it is not like any edge we have met. The observable horizon marks what we can see. The wall of light marks how far back light can carry us. But the event horizon marks something more absolute than either. It marks the limit of what we can ever touch. Everything inside it we could in principle still reach or signal, given enough time. Everything beyond it is gone from us forever, unreachable at any speed, for all of time, with no exception and no appeal. Let me make sure the weight of this lands, because it is easy to hear 16 billion light-years and file it away as just another big number. The event horizon is not about seeing. You can see far past it. Galaxies, well beyond the event horizon, are perfectly visible in our telescopes, their ancient light still arriving from the era before the gap grew too wide. So, this is not a wall that hides things. It is worse than that. It lets you keep looking at places you have already lost. A galaxy just beyond the event horizon shines in our images, and we could point at it, study it, name it, and know with certainty that if we launched a beam of light toward it this instant, that beam would chase it across the growing dark forever and never close the distance. The image in our telescope and the place itself have been divorced. We hold the photograph. The subject has walked out of the frame and can never be reached again. Seeing and reaching, which every instinct tells us go together, have been cut cleanly apart. Now for the number that should genuinely disturb you, because it is not a distant hypothetical. Of all the galaxies we can currently see, all the 2 trillion of them spread across the observable universe, the overwhelming majority are already beyond the event horizon. The estimates put it near 97%. 97 of every 100 galaxies visible in our sky tonight are already permanently out of reach. Light we send toward them today will never arrive. Any message, any craft, any signal, launched now at the fastest speed the universe permits, would fall behind the expansion and drift forever without landing. We can see them. We will always be able to see their old light for a long time to come, and we lost them before we ever knew they were there. Only a thin few % of the visible universe remains inside the reachable zone, and everything else is a light in the window of a house we can never walk to, no matter how long we walk. I want to follow a single beam of light, to make the divorce of seeing and reaching as concrete as it truly is. Somewhere out near the event horizon, a galaxy is shining, and one particular flash of its light is leaving right now, aimed straight at us, as straight and true as light can be aimed. That flash sets out across the gap at the fastest speed the universe allows. But the gap is not holding still. The space between that galaxy and us is expanding, and out there it is expanding fast, adding new distance to the beam's journey faster than the beam can eat the distance away. The flash flies for 1 billion years and finds itself farther from us than when it started. It flies for 10 billion more and falls farther still behind. It will fly forever, always moving toward us at the speed of light, and it will never, ever arrive. That flash is not on its way. It is on a road that lengthens faster than any traveller can walk it, and no one at the far end will ever see it land. This is why the grief in this edge is real and not a figure of speech. When you look at the faint galaxies at the limit of a long exposure, you are holding the last letters of a correspondence that has already been ended by physics. Old light is still arriving, letters mailed long ago, still in transit, and for a while yet the mail will keep coming. But no reply you send will ever land, and no new letter written by those galaxies today will ever reach you. The relationship is over, sealed by the expansion, and only the delayed delivery of ancient mail keeps it from feeling over. We are surrounded on every side by the light of places we have already, permanently, and completely lost, and the strangest part is how ordinary the sky looks while it is happening. There is no sign in the image that the subject is gone. There is only the old, patient light arriving faithfully from the departed. I want to slow all the way down here, because this is the emotional center of the whole night, and it deserves stillness rather than more facts. Think about what it means to be surrounded by the light of the unreachable. When you look at the faint galaxies at the limit of the great long exposure images, you are receiving light that left them billions of years ago. In the billions of years since, the expansion has carried those galaxies out past the event horizon. The light arriving in the sensor tonight is the last chapter of a correspondence that has already ended. There will be more old light for a while, yesterday's letters still in transit, but the line is cut. We can never send a reply that lands. We can never know what became of them. And because their light is so old, and because they have had billions of years to change, some of those galaxies, as we see them, may not exist anymore in any recognizable form at all. We are keeping company with the light of the departed, a sky full of portraits of places that are gone or transformed or forever sealed away, and the portraits are all we will ever have of them. That is not a fact about astronomy. It is closer to grief, if you let it be, a quiet mourning for 2 trillion neighbours we can see and never meet. There is a particular quiet horror in realising that this loss is not an event but a condition, one that was already true before you were born and will keep being true after everyone is gone. No alarm ever sounded when those galaxies crossed the line. There was no flash, no sound, no visible change in the sky. They simply drifted on the growing tide of space from the set of places we could reach into the set of places we never can, and the only record of the crossing is a number in a calculation. You have lived your entire life already surrounded by the light of the unreachable, under a sky most of which was lost before humanity looked up, and nothing about the view ever hinted at it. The most complete severance imaginable, the permanent cutting off of almost everything there is, happened and keeps happening in total silence, behind a sky that looks exactly as calm as it always has. And here is the reason this edge is worse than all the ones before it, the reason it is the true subject of tonight. Every previous edge was a limit on knowledge or sight, a boundary of what we could learn. This one is a limit on connection, on the very possibility of ever reaching out and having it matter. The universe is not merely too big to cross. It is actively arranging itself so that the crossing becomes more impossible with every passing year, carrying more and more of itself out past the line of no return. The event horizon is not sitting still, waiting for us to grow up and reach it. It is doing something, right now, tonight, while you rest. It is closing. And to understand why it closes, and how fast, and what it means for everything that will ever try to live in this universe after us, we have to look at the engine driving the whole grim machine, the thing that makes up most of the universe, and that no one can fully explain. We have to talk about what is pushing the expansion faster. Part 9. The engine of the loss. We have arrived at a boundary that closes in around us, the event horizon, carrying the universe out of reach a little more each year. The obvious question is why? Why should the expansion, which might have been slowing down under the pull of all the matter in the universe, instead be speeding up, driving galaxies past the line of no return faster and faster? For most of the 20th century, physicists assumed the opposite. They expected the expansion to be gradually breaking, held back by the gravity of everything the universe contains, the way a ball thrown upward is slowed by the Earth. The great question was only whether gravity would win and pull everything back, or whether the expansion would coast outward forever, always slowing but never quite stopping. Almost no one expected what the measurements actually found. In the late 1990s, 2 teams of astronomers set out to measure the slowing of the expansion by studying a particular kind of exploding star, a type of supernova that always detonates with nearly the same true brightness. Because these explosions are standard beacons, their apparent faintness tells you how far away they are, and their light stretching tells you how much the universe has expanded since the light left. By gathering these distant beacons, the teams could chart how the expansion rate had changed over billions of years. They expected to see it slowing. Instead, in 1998 and the years around it, both teams found that the distant supernovae were fainter than they should have been, which meant they were farther away than a slowing universe could explain. The expansion was not breaking. It had been speeding up. The universe is accelerating, pushing itself apart harder and harder as time goes on, and the discovery was so unexpected and so well supported that it earned the Nobel Prize in 2011. Something must be driving that acceleration, some form of energy that pushes space to expand rather than letting gravity slow it. We do not know what it is. We call it dark energy, which is less a name than a confession, a label for an effect we can measure precisely and explain barely at all. What we do know is startling enough. Dark energy is not a minor correction to the universe. It is the majority of it. When you add up everything, all the energy and all the matter in the cosmos, roughly 69% of the total is this dark energy, this pressure built into empty space that drives the expansion faster. The ordinary matter that makes up stars and planets and you, everything you have ever seen or touched, is about 5% of the universe. The mysterious dark matter that holds galaxies together is about 27%. And the rest, the largest share by far, is the thing we cannot explain, the engine pushing everything apart. The universe is mostly made of the reason it is coming undone. It is worth sitting with how strange it is that the name dark energy is really an admission rather than an explanation. We can measure its effect with great precision. We can say how much of it there is, how strongly it pushes, how the acceleration has changed over billions of years. What we cannot say is what it is. The simplest idea is that it is an energy belonging to empty space itself, a pressure built into the vacuum, so that even a region with no matter in it at all still contains this faint, relentless push. But when physicists try to calculate how much energy empty space should contain, using our best theories of the very small, the answer they get is wrong by a margin so enormous it is almost comic, larger than the measured value by a number with more zeros than there are atoms in your body. So we are in the peculiar position of knowing that most of the universe is made of something, measuring it carefully, and having no working account of why it has the value it does. The engine driving the loss of everything is also the largest unsolved problem in physics. Set this against what physicists once expected, and the reversal is stark. For most of the last century, the two imagined fates of the universe were both, in their way, comprehensible. Either gravity would eventually win, halt the expansion, and pull everything back together into a hot collapse, or the expansion would coast outward forever, always slowing, matter thinning gently toward a cold and quiet rest. Both were endings you could understand. Neither involved a mysterious majority ingredient, pushing the universe apart harder every year, sealing horizons, and erasing the past from the sky. The universe we actually live in was almost nobody's expectation. It is stranger and lonelier than either fate we prepared ourselves for, and the thing that makes it so is the very substance we can measure best and understand least. Now connect this back to the edge that closes in, because the connection is the whole grim point. In a universe slowing under gravity, the event horizon would grow over time. Light would have an ever easier journey, distant regions would gradually come into reach, and the reachable universe would swell. That is the universe most physicists once expected, a generous one opening outward. But we do not live in that universe. We live in an accelerating one, and in an accelerating universe the event horizon does the reverse. As the expansion speeds up, the distance beyond which light can never reach us draws inward. The reachable zone does not grow, it shrinks. Every year, the acceleration carries more galaxies across the horizon and out of reach, and the boundary of what we could ever touch contracts, tightening around us like a slow tide going out and never coming back. The engine that makes up most of the universe is the same engine steadily reducing the part of it we can ever hope to reach. To make the far future concrete rather than abstract, picture the sky changing over unimaginable spans. Right now, the night is full of other galaxies, faint smudges beyond counting, and the ancient glow fills every direction. Run the acceleration forward, and the smudges begin to thin. The most distant ones redden and dim and slip below detection first, then the nearer ones follow, decade upon cosmic decade, until the sky beyond our own bound neighborhood empties entirely. Even the ancient glow, that leftover light on the wall, stretches so far that it cools past the point where any instrument could catch it. The universe does not announce any of this. There is no moment of collapse, no visible catastrophe. There is only a sky that gets emptier and emptier, so slowly that no single generation would notice, until one day, far beyond any span we can feel, there is nothing left in it but the home island of stars, and a perfect, patient dark in every direction beyond. This is the point where the fear stops being about size and starts being about time, about trajectory, about where all of this is heading. It is one thing to live in a universe that is too big to cross. It is another to live in a universe that is actively making itself less crossable, sealing exits, drawing in its own horizons, and doing it faster with each passing age. The losses we counted in the last part, the 97% already gone, are not the end of the tally. They are a snapshot of an ongoing subtraction. The universe is not merely large and lonely. It is becoming lonelier by design, its own dominant ingredient working steadily to isolate every island of light from every other. And if you follow that process forward, far forward, past the span of any civilization, you arrive at a future so stripped and so dark that it forces us to ask a question we have been avoiding all night. Not where is the edge of space, but whether there is an edge to knowledge itself, a time beyond which the truth of the universe can no longer be discovered at all. Part 10. The Edge That Isn't in Space. Every edge we have found so far has been a boundary in space, a distance you could point to, even if you could never reach it. But there is one edge that is not in space at all, and once we have named it, we will see that it has a twin waiting in the future, and the twin is the most quietly devastating idea in this entire journey. The edge not in space is the beginning of time. When we look outward, and therefore backward, and past the wall of light, and imagine going further still, we eventually reach the beginning itself, the moment the expansion started, about 13.8 billion years ago. That moment is a genuine edge, the only true one in the whole tour, because it is not a place where the universe stops in space, but a place where time itself begins. You cannot ask what is north of the North Pole. There is no such direction. In the same way, the beginning may be a boundary of time past, which there is simply no earlier, no before, nothing to point at. It is the one edge that is a real boundary of the thing itself, rather than a limit of our sight or our reach. That alone would be enough to sit with. But the beginning has a mirror in the future, and the mirror is where the terror of tonight completes itself. We have seen that the expansion is accelerating, that galaxies are crossing the event horizon and vanishing from reach, that the reachable universe is shrinking. Run that process forward, not by thousands of years, but by tens and hundreds of billions, and the sky itself changes. One by one, the galaxies beyond our own small gravitationally bound neighborhood are carried across the horizon and out of view. Their light stretches further and further toward the red until it fades below anything that could be detected, and then they are simply gone, not just unreachable but invisible, dropped out of the observable universe entirely. Our own galaxy, and the handful of others bound closely to it, will by then have merged into a single island of stars, and around that island there will be nothing, no other galaxies, no structure in the sky beyond the home island, just one lit place adrift in a perfect and endless dark. This future was worked out carefully by physicists, and it carries a name that should send a chill through anyone who values knowing things. They called it the end of cosmology. Here is what it means. Imagine astronomers living in that far future, in the merged island galaxy, tens of billions of years from now, as intelligent and curious and rigorous as any who have ever lived. They point their finest instruments at the sky beyond their own stars, and they find nothing there, no galaxies, because all the others have crossed the horizon and faded away. No leftover glow from the beginning, because the wall of light has been stretched so far by then that it has cooled below all detection, its afterglow drawn out into wavelengths too faint and too long to catch. To those astronomers, The universe would appear to be a single static island of stars, sitting in an eternal, unchanging void. They would have no way to discover that space is expanding, because there would be nothing distant left to watch recede. They would have no way to learn that there was a beginning, because the evidence of it would have faded from the sky. They would conclude, carefully and reasonably and completely wrongly, that they live in a small, lonely, eternal universe that never began and never changes. The comparison to the North Pole is worth taking slowly, because it is the key that unlocks how a beginning can be an edge without being a wall. Stand at the North Pole and ask which way is north. There is no answer. It is not that the question is hard, or that north is hidden somewhere you cannot reach. It is that north simply stops being a meaningful direction at that point. Every direction from the pole is south. In the same way, ask what happened before the beginning, and the honest possibility physics offers is not a hidden earlier time we cannot see, but that before stops being a meaningful word, that time itself begins there, and there is no earlier to point at. The beginning is an edge of that kind, a boundary not because something blocks the way, but because the road itself does not continue. It is the only edge tonight that is a true boundary of the universe, rather than a limit of our sight, and it lies not at the far reaches of space, but at the bottom of time. Now weigh the warning hidden in the end of cosmology, because it is sharper than it first appears. We have been assuming all our lives that knowledge only grows, that the story of the universe is one of steadily gathering more of the truth. But if the universe can carry the evidence of its own past completely out of reach, so thoroughly that future astronomers could never recover it, then knowledge is not a thing that only accumulates. It is a thing that can be lost permanently, not through carelessness, but through physics, and that raises the possibility we cannot rule out, that some of it is already gone. There may have been signals, structures, whole features of the early universe that have already crossed beyond every horizon we possess, leaving nothing behind, no trace we could ever find. We would not feel their absence. We would simply have a slightly wrong picture and no way to know it was wrong. The book we are reading may already be missing pages, torn out by the expansion before we ever opened it. Let that settle, because it is not science fiction, and it is not a distant curiosity. It is a straightforward consequence of the physics we have measured, of the acceleration we detected in the supernovae, of the dark energy that makes up most of the universe. The truth of how everything began, the expansion, the 2 trillion galaxies, the wall of ancient light, all the things we have spent tonight uncovering, are written in the sky now, readable now, but they are being erased. The universe is deleting the evidence of its own history, not hiding it behind a wall we might someday peer around, but destroying the very possibility of discovering it by carrying the clues out past every horizon and fading them into a dark that no instrument, however perfect, could ever penetrate. Knowledge itself has an expiration date, stamped into the physics, and the deadline is moving. And this opens a question that turns the fear back on us, right here, right now, in a way nothing else tonight has. If the universe can erase the evidence of its past so completely that future astronomers could never recover it, then how do we know it has not already erased some of its evidence from us? How confident can we be that we are seeing the full story, and not a partial one, with earlier chapters already carried beyond every horizon we possess, gone before we ever arrive to look? The end of cosmology is not only a prophecy about the far future, it is a warning about the present. We may already be reading a book with pages missing, pages that crossed the horizon long ago, and we would have no way to know they were ever there. The edge, it turns out, does not only limit how far we can see and reach, it limits how much of the truth is even available to be known, and that limit is closing in from the future as surely as the reachable horizon is closing in across space. Part 11. The Lit Window. If the truth of the universe is being erased, then we are standing in a very particular place in the history of everything, and it is worth stopping to feel exactly where we are, because it is stranger and more precious than any edge we have crossed. We are living in the window when the evidence is still readable. The other galaxies have not yet crossed the horizon. The wall of ancient light has not yet faded below detection. The expansion is still visible in the stretching of distant light, the beginning still legible in the afterglow that fills the sky. All the clues that let us reconstruct the story of the cosmos are still here, still arriving, still bright enough to read. This will not always be so. There was a time, long ago, when the universe was too young and too hot for any of this to be worked out, and there will be a time, far ahead, when it will be too old and too empty. We are in the middle, in the lit window, in the brief cosmic afternoon, when the universe can still be understood by the things living inside it. That is not a small thing. It may be the rarest thing about our whole existence. I want to take you somewhere for this, the way we rose up to feel the scale earlier, but this time we are going forward in time instead of outward in space. Come with me to that far future, to the island galaxy, tens of billions of years from now, long after our sun has died, and our Earth is gone, and everything we know has been remade many times over. Somewhere in that merged island of stars, imagine a being at the eyepiece of the finest telescope its civilization has ever built. It is curious in the way we are curious. It wants to know what lies beyond its own galaxy, what the universe is, where it came from. So it turns the great instrument outward, past the last of its own stars, into the dark, and it looks, and there is nothing there, no smudge of another galaxy, no faint web of distant light, no leftover warmth from any beginning, only black, perfect and unbroken, in every direction its telescope can point. The being checks the instrument, and the instrument is flawless. It looks again, and again there is nothing. It concludes, because the evidence gives it no other choice, that its island of stars is the whole of creation, alone in an empty and eternal night, with no beginning and no neighbours and no story to tell. Feel the weight of that scene, because it holds the darkest of tonight's fears, and also something close to grace. That future astronomer is not less intelligent than we are. It is not lazy or careless. It is simply born too late into a universe that has already deleted the answers, and no amount of brilliance can recover what the expansion has carried beyond every horizon. It will never know about the 2 trillion galaxies. It will never know about the wall of ancient light, or the beginning, or the fact that its own island was once a small gathering of separate galaxies drawn together across a sky then full of others. The truth we hold tonight, the truth we have spent these hours uncovering, will be permanently, structurally unavailable to it. And that means something about us that is easy to miss. We are among the ones who got to see. We are alive in the reading window, when the sky is still full of clues, and we are using it, right now, to learn the shape of everything before the shape fades. There have been, and will be, countless beings who never got that chance. We did. That is the strange and mournful privilege of living now, in the lit window, before the lights at the far edge go out. There is a responsibility folded into this privilege, and it is a gentle one, but it is real. If we are among the few beings who happen to live in the window when the universe can still be understood, then the understanding is, in a sense, ours to hold on behalf of all the minds that came too early to learn it and all the minds that will come too late. The far future astronomer will never know about the 2 trillion galaxies, but we know. We are the ones the universe permitted to see its full shape, briefly, in the short cosmic afternoon. And there is something worth honouring in simply doing the seeing well, in looking as carefully and as honestly as we can while the looking is still possible. Not because it changes the fate of the horizons, which it cannot, but because the seeing itself is the rarest thing, and we are the ones holding it. There is a grief in this that is worth naming plainly, rather than rushing past, because it is the honest emotional core of the whole subject. It is the grief of a witness to something that will not last. When you learn that the universe is erasing its own history, you are learning that the knowledge itself is mortal, that even the truth has a lifespan, that the most carefully won understanding will one day be uncrossably out of reach for every mind that comes after. We tend to think of facts as permanent once discovered, of knowledge as a thing that only accumulates. The universe disagrees. It is quietly taking back the very information we are gathering, and it will not stop, and there is nothing anyone can do about it. And all we can do is look while the looking is still possible. I keep returning to the tenderness in this, because it is the honest counterweight to all the dread, and it is just as true. We are small and brief, and the universe is enormous and doomed to grow dark and lonely. But we happen to open our eyes at the one time in the entire history of everything when the whole story could still be read from the sky, and instead of looking away, we looked. We built instruments to catch the oldest light. We measured the stretching of space. We counted the galaxies and mapped the wall, and worked out the fate of it all. No law required the universe to produce beings who could do this, and no law will keep producing them once the window closes. That we are here, now, in the reading window, doing the reading, is not a small consolation set against the darkness. It may be the whole point of the darkness having, for a while, a place in it that could understand itself. But do not let that grief become despair, because the same fact carries its opposite folded inside it. We are here, we are looking. The window is open now, and we are alive inside it, and we can still see the whole strange, enormous, doomed, beautiful arrangement of everything. That is not nothing. That may be the most that any being can ever hope for, to arrive during the reading window and to spend it reading. And there is one more page we have not yet turned. One more question the edges have been keeping from us, larger than all the rest. We have measured the walls we are locked inside. We have not yet asked how much universe lies beyond all of them, past the last horizon, on the far side of everything we can ever see or reach or know. The answer is the least certain thing tonight, and in some ways the most vertiginous of all. Part 12. How far does it go? We have spent all night inside the walls, measuring them, learning their names, feeling them close in. Now let us ask the question the walls exist to prevent us from answering. How much universe is there beyond the observable, past the last horizon, on the far side of everything our light and our instruments can reach? This is the one place tonight where I have to be openly honest that we are leaving measured fact and stepping onto ground that is partly speculation, and I will keep telling you which is which, because this channel does not pretend that a good story and a proven fact are the same thing. But even the honest, careful answer is enough to make the floor feel unsteady, because everything we can measure points toward a universe vastly larger than the small lit sphere we live inside, possibly without limit at all. Start with what we actually know, because it is remarkable on its own. We can measure the shape of space, the way it curves, by looking at the geometry of the ancient light on the wall of the sky. If space were curved like the surface of an enormous sphere, we would see subtle distortions in the patterns of that light, and if it were curved the other way, we would see distortions of the opposite kind. What we see instead, to very high precision, is no measurable curvature at all. Space appears to be flat, or so close to flat that we cannot detect the difference. And a flat universe, under the physics we trust, is not a small thing curving back on itself. It is either infinite, going on without end in every direction, or it is finite but enormously larger than the part we can see, larger by a factor we can put a floor under. Careful analysis of the flatness tells us that the whole universe is at minimum something like hundreds of times larger across than the observable sphere, and by volume, at least millions of times bigger. That is the conservative, measured floor. The everything we have explored tonight, the 2 trillion galaxies, the 93 billion light-years of observable space, all of it, is at most a tiny fraction of a percent of the true whole, and quite possibly an infinitely small fraction of something that never ends. Now step, carefully and with the label showing, into speculation, because this is where the flatness leads if you follow it to its edge. Suppose space really is infinite, going on forever, and suppose it is filled roughly evenly with matter, as everything we can see suggests. Then something very strange must be true. In any finite volume of space, there are only so many ways that matter can be arranged, an enormous number, but a finite one. If space goes on infinitely, and the same finite set of possible arrangements keeps getting used over and over across that endlessness, then arrangements must eventually repeat. Somewhere out there, unimaginably far beyond our horizon, there would be a region of space arranged almost exactly like this one. And taken to its limit, this suggests that somewhere past an incomprehensible distance, there would be a near copy of this galaxy, this world, this room, and a near copy of you, sitting where you are sitting, hearing these same words, living a life almost, but not quite identical to yours. I want to be completely clear that this cannot be observed, may never be testable, and rests entirely on the assumption that the measured flatness continues past the edge we cannot cross. It is included not as a claim, but as the strangest thing that follows if the numbers we can measure keep going. It is the vertigo of a universe possibly so large that everything, including your own life, is repeated somewhere in the dark. While we are at the edge of the measurable, it is worth putting to rest the most common way people try to escape all of this, because escaping it is tempting and the escape does not hold. Some argue that the whole picture of expanding space is a mistake, that the reddening of distant light is not caused by space stretching at all, but by light simply growing tired over billions of years and losing energy as it travels. It is an appealing idea, because if there were no real expansion, there would be no runaway, no event horizon closing in, no erasure of the past, none of the fears we have built tonight. But the tired light idea, first floated nearly a century ago, has been tested many times and fails every test that matters. The explosions of distant stars are seen to unfold in slow motion, their light stretched out in time, exactly as real expansion predicts, and tired light cannot explain. The ancient light on the wall of the sky is a flawless glow of a single temperature, which any gradual energy loss process would smear and distort. The apparent brightness of distant galaxies fades with distance in precisely the pattern expansion requires. The expansion is not an assumption we could drop to feel better. It is the one picture that survives the tests. The comforting alternatives fail. The floor is not going to steady itself. It was never solid to begin with. It is worth being clear about how the flatness is actually measured, because it is one of the more elegant things we can do, and it grounds the whole enormous conclusion in real observation rather than assumption. Recall the faint ripples in the ancient light, the slightly warmer and cooler patches. Physics predicts a characteristic size for those patches, a typical width they should have when the light left the wall of last scattering. We can also measure how large they appear to us in the sky. If space between us and the wall were curved one way, those patches would look larger than their true size, magnified like an image seen through a lens. Curved the other way, they would look smaller. We measure them, we compare the apparent size to the predicted true size, and they match almost exactly. The patches are the size they should be with no curvature at all. That match, patient and precise, is how we know that space is flat to within a tiny margin, and it is from that flatness that the enormous or infinite size of the whole universe follows. The tests that sink the tired light idea deserve to be spelled out too, because it is the escape hatch people reach for most, and it is worth understanding exactly why it is bolted shut. When a distant star explodes, the explosion unfolds over a certain number of days in its own time. If the reddening of its light were caused by the light simply losing energy on a long journey, the explosion would still appear to unfold over its normal span. But it does not. The more distant and more reddened the explosion, the more its entire unfolding appears stretched out in time, running in slow motion, by exactly the factor that expanding space predicts and tired light does not. The clock of the explosion itself is stretched, not just the color of its light, and only the growth of space can stretch a clock. Add to this the flawless single temperature of the ancient light, which any energy loss process would smear, and the specific way distant galaxies dim, and the tired light idea fails on every front at once. The comforting version of the universe, the one with no runaway and no closing edge, is precisely the one the measurements forbid. So here is where the last door leaves us. Everything we can measure, says the universe, is enormously larger than the sphere we can see, at minimum hundreds of times across, quite possibly without end. And if without end, then possibly repeating, possibly containing copies of this very moment, scattered through an infinity we can never reach. The edges we spent tonight mapping, terrifying as each one was, may enclose only the smallest imaginable corner of the true whole. And that reframes everything, one final time, and hands us the reversal that has been waiting since the first door. Because if the universe is that large, and mostly unreachable, and erasing its own history, and locking us inside shrinking walls, then the most important thing about the edge was never how far away the farthest one lies. It was something else entirely, something much closer to home, and it is time to say it plainly. Part 13. The Edge That Is Closing In. We started tonight with a child's picture of the edge of the universe as a wall at the end of everything, impossibly far away, and we spent hours travelling outward toward it, opening one door after another. There was no wall. There was a horizon of sight, 46 billion light-years off, receding as we chased it, like the horizon at sea that slips backward as you sail toward it. There was the discovery that looking out is looking back, that the sky is a graveyard of old light. There was the wall of ancient fire surrounding us on every side, and the secret behind it that our instruments can barely hear. There was the loneliness of the scale, and the growth of space that outruns light, and the event horizon that carries the universe out of reach, and the engine of dark energy driving the loss, and the erasure of cosmic history from the future sky, and finally, a universe possibly infinite and repeating, enclosing us in the smallest corner of itself. Each edge was worse than the one before. That was the promise I made you at the very first door, and the universe has kept it, rung by rung, all the way down. But now I owe you the reversal, the thing all of this has been circling. Look back over the whole journey and ask which edge actually matters most, which one truly shapes the fate of everything that will ever live here. It is not the farthest one. The observable horizon, 46 billion light-years away, is impressive, but it is passive. It just marks how far the light has come, and it grows as time passes, letting more into view. The edge that matters, the one that decides everything, is not the farthest. It is the nearest of the great cosmic edges, the reachable boundary, only 16 billion light-years out, and unlike all the others, it is not sitting still, and it is not moving away. It is closing in. Every year it draws tighter. Every year it carries more of the universe across the line of no return. The horizon at sea recedes as you sail toward it. This horizon does the opposite. It advances. It sweeps inward across the sky, galaxy by galaxy, subtracting them one at a time from the set of things we could ever touch. And it does this faster with every passing age. The edge was never a distant destination waiting to be reached. It was always a wall moving toward us. Take one more honest look at the reversal, because it is the whole point of the night, and it deserves to be seen clearly rather than felt in passing. Every instinct we have about danger is built around things that approach us from outside. A predator, a storm, a falling weight, a rising tide. So, when we imagine the edge of the universe as a threat, we picture it as something far away that we might one day travel to and confront, a distant wall at the end of a long journey outward. But the edge that actually governs our fate does not work like anything that comes from outside, because it is not outside at all. The expansion that draws the reachable horizon inward is not happening somewhere far away. It is happening in every gap between every pair of points in the universe, including the gaps here, in this room, between you and the door, at every point at once. The edge is not approaching from the distance. It is unfolding from within, everywhere, always, and its inward march across the sky is only the largest visible face of something that is a property of space itself. That is the true shape of the fear, and it is why the closer we get to understanding the edge, the more terrifying it becomes. Not because the edge is far and cold and enormous, though it is all of those, but because the edge is not out there at all, in the way we imagined. It is a property of the space you are sitting in right now. The same expansion that carries distant galaxies past the event horizon is happening here, in this room, between you and the walls, between the walls and the door, between the atoms of your own hand, at every point in space at once. On small scales, gravity and the forces holding matter together are far too strong for the expansion to matter, so your body and your room and your world hold together easily. But the growing of space is not somewhere else. It is everywhere, including here, and the edges it creates are not distant boundaries you would have to travel to. They are drawn around you, centered on you, right now. You have been living inside all of them your whole life, at the center of a shrinking sphere of reachable universe, under a wall of ancient light, inside a graveyard of old images, and you never felt a thing. Here is what I would ask you to hold as you drift off tonight, and I mean it as something closer to comfort than to dread, though it wears the clothes of dread. The universe is closing its own windows. One by one, on a schedule written into the physics, the far lights are being carried out past the last horizon, and the truth of how everything began is quietly being erased from the sky. That process is real, and it cannot be stopped. But it has not finished. The windows are still open, the far lights are still on. The other galaxies still hang in our images. The ancient glow still fills the room. The whole strange, enormous, doomed arrangement of everything is still visible, still readable, still here, tonight, for us. We arrive during the lit window. We are among the ones who got to see. And there is something almost unbearably tender in that to be a brief, warm, thinking thing that opened its eyes during the short cosmic afternoon when the universe could still be understood, and spent a little of that time looking outward, toward the edges, learning their names before they close. I want to give you one plain image to carry into sleep, because it holds the whole night in a single picture. Think of the universe as an enormous house at dusk, with countless windows, each one a galaxy, each one lit. Very slowly, on a schedule you could never watch happen, the far windows are going dark, one by one, as the expansion carries them past the point where their light can reach you. The house is not being destroyed. It is only being closed up, room by distant room, the light in each far window winking out for good. But you are standing in a room where the lamp is still burning, and through your own window the light of a great many others still shines, arriving across the dark, faithful and old and beautiful. The windows are closing, that is true, but yours is open, and the light is still coming in, and it will keep coming in for longer than every life that will ever be lived. So the edge is closing in. That is the terrible and honest truth we found at the end of the journey. but it is closing slowly, over spans of time so long that every life that will ever be lived, including yours, falls entirely within the window when the lights are still on. The wall is moving toward us. It will not arrive tonight, or in any night you will ever know. And between now and then there is only this, the open window, the visible sky, the last of the far light still crossing the dark to reach us, arriving even now in the quiet while you rest. Let the edges be where they are. Let the horizon do its slow and patient closing. You are here, in the lit window, under the ancient glow, at the center of your own sphere of sight, and the light is still coming in. That is enough. For tonight, that is more than enough. Rest now, and let the far lights keep you company while they still shine.